So now that we know how to draw a scatter plot or construct a scatter plot, what we now need to do with it is to be able to interpret it. So collecting data and displaying it is not enough. The real focus now in Year 11 and going into Year 12 is going to be interpreting the information that you get from it. So when we are talking about a scatter plot, there are three things that you should always talk about. The first thing is its direction, its form, and its strength. So let's talk about direction first of all. We'll go in order. So the direction of an association. Now, association may be a word that you haven't come across before, but association is just another word for relationship. So we're talking about the relationship between those dots in the scatter plot. And if you're looking at this first one here, we're talking about a positive association. You can see, hopefully, that although the dots don't fall on a straight line, they do go up in a linear direction, so in a positive direction. If you had a straight line going through that, it would be a positive gradient. So that's what we call a positive association. And so therefore with the next one here, you've got the dots going down that way, and so they're going down in a negative direction. So that is a negative association. If you cannot see any relationship whatsoever, then we would say that there is no association. All right, no association if there is absolutely no relationship there. Now, what we are talking about is the trend of the data. You will hear that word quite a bit. So here we have a positive trend, a negative trend, no trend or no association. So trend, relationship, and association are all words that can be used to talk about the direction. Now, the form of the association of the relationship is pretty straightforward for us. It's either going to be linear or not linear. And anything that is not linear, then that's the end of it for us at this point. So we'll only be dealing with data that has a linear association. So looking at the two examples here, all right, again, hopefully you can see that, yes, it has a positive trend, and I can faintly draw a line through that. Yep, it doesn't go through all the points. It doesn't have to. All right, it just needs to think about what way that data is heading. If I was going to look at this next one here, okay, hopefully green's okay, and then you can see there's a curve going through that data. So this one here would be linear, and this one would obviously not be linear. So when we talk about form, it can only be one of two things. It can be linear in form or non-linear. And the third thing that we talk about when describing an association is the strength. So we've talked about direction and form, and now we're talking about strength. So what we're really looking at here is how closely bonded the dots are, or are they spread out or almost closely lying in a straight line. So if I'm looking at these examples here, you can see that, again, we're not talking about them lying exactly in a straight line, but drawing a trend line through that, you can very clearly see that the dots are just lying either side. So that would be strong, it would be positive, and it would also be linear in form. This next one here although it is a strong relationship, it is not linear. Okay, so you can see the curve happening there, so that would not be considered linear. This one, again, hopefully we're looking at the fact that we're getting this straight line trend, and again it's going in a negative direction. So if I was describing that, I'd say it's strong, negative, and linear in form. Now, these are all visual observations, because a lot of you are probably thinking, well, how would I know the difference between something that is strong or perhaps medium? And in the next couple of lessons, I'm going to show you a mathematical way of working out the strength. At this point, all I want you to be able to do is to look at something and give it a guesstimate. So we're looking at moderate, weak, and no associations here. Hopefully you can see moderate, that the dots are spread out a little bit more, but yet you can probably put a line that way for positive, a line that way for negative, and the one in the middle, although they're calling it moderate positive, there is no, it's not linear in form. So only the ones on the outside are linear in form, positive and negative. When it becomes weak, it becomes a little less difficult to see, but there is still some semblance there, if you like, of a line. The dots are very spread out, and that way the dots are very spread out for a negative. So if I was describing this one, I'd say that it is weak, negative, and linear in form. This one here, it's a bit of a question mark. Some of them are, especially when they're visual. Is it linear in form? Some people might say yes, others might say no. So there can be question marks. And the last one here, we're looking at this one here. The dots are so spread out that you can't, you could put a line anyway and rationalize it, I guess. So just when you really can't see any sort of trend happening, you say that there is no association. So let's cap that off. We talk about strength, and our options for strength are strong, medium, weak, and even no association if we cannot draw a line there. So that is the strength of the scatter plot. We talk about the form, and really we only have the two options there. It is either linear in form or non-linear. And then we talk about the direction. And for direction, it can be positive or negative. Okay, obviously if there is no association, then it can't have a direction. So looking at this first example here, we've got our scatter plot already drawn for us. In fact, it's using variables that we're very familiar with here, the mark that you receive on an exam and the time you spend studying. And what we can see just by looking at the actual scatter plot, as time increases, the actual mark is increasing as well. So let's talk about that in terms of direction, strength, and form. So we can see that it is going up in a positive direction, and the dots are fairly close together. I'd say that's a strong, linear, positive relationship. So strong, linear in form, and positive. So we've got our direction, we've got our strength, and we have our form there. Doesn't really matter what order you put them in, strong, linear, positive, or strong, positive, linear. That's all going to describe it the same way. Now, the question did want us to describe it in terms of the variables, So therefore we can see here that the more time students spend studying, the higher the grade they will receive. Looking at the next one, the scatter plot is about the price of a car and the age of the car. And again, so looking visually at the scatter plot first, as this age of this car is increasing, what is happening to the price of the car? Well, you can see that it is going down, which makes sense as cars increase in age, and we're not talking about vintage cars, but as cars increase in age, they generally depreciate in value, so their price goes down. So how would we describe this scatter plot just mathematically? Again, as a visual, I would say that it's strong and that it's linear, but this time it is negative. So strong, negative, and linear. And again, describing it in terms of its variables, as the age of the car increases, the price or the value of the car decreases. So although we tend to dismiss the interpretation side as not being mathematics, it is something that you have to become really very strong at, because a lot of the work will involve your interpretation as we move forward in statistics.